Okay, thank you for joining once again. We will continue with what we were saying in the last lecture about withdrawals and injections. So, for the economy to be in equilibrium, the withdrawals need to be equal to the injections. And it's simple. If you look at this diagram, people are withdrawing money, the households are withdrawing money and putting them as savings in the banks. And what are these banks then doing? These banks are then lending the money back to the firm. So the income in the end, was the same thing happens, that the income comes back in the loop and the withdrawals become equal to the injections. However, if the withdrawals appear to be more than injections, okay, then the national income will fall. Obviously your income is not coming in the in the circular flow, so the income is going to fall. So what are you going to do? You are going to keep reducing your withdrawals until the withdrawals again become equal to injections. And if the injections are more and the withdrawals are less, then the national income will rise. So you will then increase your withdrawals until the withdrawals become equal to injections. So aggregate expenditure, according to the aggregate expenditure approach, then your aggregate expenditure, which is C plus I plus G plus X, must equal to the national income. So here, in this approach, the level of income is determined by the expenditure. But if the aggregate expenditure appears to be more, if it is more than income, then what will happen? It means that people want to spend more. The demand is higher. Okay, so this, in order to in order to respond to this extra demand, more factors of production will be employed. And why will be employed? Because under this assumption some unemployment always occurs, and this demand will be satisfied and income will increase until aggregate expenditure becomes equal to the income. Conversely, if the aggregate expenditure is less and you are producing more in the economy, then you're going to cut back on production. You're going to create unemployment. You are going to reduce the level of your output, so that the aggregate expenditure becomes equal to the income. We now come to what is called the two sector economy. Now that we've looked at the basic concepts, we can now come to the real thing, which is the two sector economy. In the two sector economy, there are only households and firms. Firms will generate incomes which will go to the household. The household will then use these incomes for consumption. So, in the two sector economy, the activities that take place are as follows. There's either going to be consumption, expenditure, people will either spend on consumption, or they are going to save, which will become a withdrawal, or businesses are going to invest in expenditure, invest in other business ventures, which will become investment expenditure, and this will become the injection in the economy. Okay, so please do keep in mind that when we are making the consumption function, we are asking ourselves a basic question: what is consumption dependent on? What are the things that consumption is dependent on? So consumption is dependent on basically what? It is dependent on incomes. So thing which is on the left side of the equation is dependent on the thing which is on the right side of the equation. So if on the left side you have consumption, then what is it dependent on? It is dependent on your income. So consumption is a function of your income. And if we go to the linear equation, remember the linear equation we learned when we were in IGCSE or O level, we said that it was equal to y is equal to a plus bx, where a is a constant, and we will see what that constant in this case is. Please do remember that if the sign before bx is plus, it means that x and y are moving in the same direction. They are positively related. And if the sign between sign before bx is negative, then there is a negative relationship. The relationship in both cases will be linear. Okay, this is a positive sloping linear curve because because the sign before b is positive. All right, and so then if we summarize this consumption function, then what is the consumption function equal to? Consumption function is dependent upon, consumption function is a function of, it depends upon the level of disposable income. Now here we have refined the term from income, we now call it disposable income. Okay, so what is disposable income? Income that people receive from the firm when they work there, plus any transfer payments which they get from the government, any support payments, minus any taxes that you pay to the government. What will the household then do when it gets the income? The household, we get the income, we will divide the income between consumption and saving. So you can write here that the income will be divided into uh, consumption and saving. So this is what the household does. It divides the income between consumption and saving. A part of income will be consumed, a part of income will be saved. And so this is this is another demand function or a consumption function in which we have a negative sign before BP. So what does it mean? That if P rises, in this case income, if income rises, then the quantity demanded falls. I'm just assuming that this is income. So it can be true for certain products. If the income rises, then the demand for inferior goods can actually fall. So that's true for certain products. In this case, the demand curve, or the curve for this the function curve or the demand function will look something like this. When one thing rises, the other thing falls. This, I'm sorry, this is not the demand curve. This is the curve plotting the quantity demanded of the product and the income of the product. So this is not really the demand curve. Okay, so no, but the important thing to note here is that it has a negative slope. Why does it have a negative slope? Because if you notice, there is a minus sign before BP. All right. So so this is the thing that you must keep in mind, that sometimes you can have an opposite relationship between these two factors. Sometimes you can have a positive relationship. Now you can look at this equation and you can immediately say that consumption has a positive relationship. When income rises, when disposable income rises, the consumption also rises. Why? Because there is a positive sign before BYD. Okay, so again, as I told you, there is the autonomous element and there's the induced element in consumption. And This is something that I've already discussed with you. The only thing is that in this slide, you will have a proper equation for desired consumption. So the total desired consumption is the sum of autonomous and induced consumption. If you want to know what autonomous and induced consumptions are, please go back to the first video of the two-sector economy and watch that. In this video, we are more concerned with plotting the autonomous consumption on the on the graph. So it's pretty straightforward. No matter what your income is, whether your income is zero or y1 or y0, y0 or y2, your autonomous consumption will remain the same. There is a certain number of breads that you will consume, even if your income is zero. There is a certain number of onions that you will consume, even if your income is 1 million. So the autonomous level of consumption is a constant. Remember, y is equal to mx plus c. C represented the constant. So the constant consumption, C naught, call it C naught, C0 is the autonomous consumption. And then there's the induced element in consumption. This element is happening because of disposable income. As the disposable income is on the x-axis. So as the disposable income rises, your induced consumption also rises. Add up these two graphs and you are going to get the graph on the right, which is your consumption function. Consumption is equal to A plus BYD. It is equal to autonomous consumption plus the plus the a certain factor, which we will see what the factor is. So, however, you can simply say right now that the factor is the gradient of this line and the disposable income that you are earning. Okay. In order to simplify things, we are going to use some different symbols for consumption for the consumption function. So let's look at this formula for the consumption function. The consumption function is equal to C naught plus MPC multiplied by YD. MPC is the gradient of the line, and MPC is the marginal propensity to consume. How much will what percentage of the income will be consumed, what proportion of the income will be consumed when the how much, by what factor will an increase in income induce the new level of consumption. Now please remember that this propensity, this inclination to consume the income rather than save it, is represented by the gradient of this line. Okay, the gradient of the line, and mathematically it is the change in consumption that comes from a change in income. Okay. In this example we have assumed that the consumption function is linear. Linear curves, please keep in mind, linear consumption functions will have constant marginal propensity to consume. I repeat, they have constant marginal propensity to consume. So, whatever the gradient is, that gradient will remain the same if it's linear. But in reality, they are not linear. In reality, the consumption function is not linear. We will continue this and we will see what happens when it's not linear and how the MPC changes. Thank you very much indeed.